Plato, The Mind That Built Philosophy, read and published by Mr. Books. Throughout the millennia, few figures have had as chronic and transformative an impact on philosophical discourse as Plato. As a luminous mind of the classical world, Plato did not merely ponder the fundamental questions of existence, reality, knowledge, and morality. He forged a framework through which philosophy itself would flourish. To trace the intellectual heritage of the Western tradition is, in no small measure, to walk the wide avenues charted by Plato. His dialogues, theories, and educational ventures have been woven into the very fabric of intellectual inquiry. Born into a prominent Athenian family amid the turbulence of ancient Greece, Plato came of age during a period dense with political instability, social upheaval, and unprecedented intellectual ferment. His philosophical pursuits were deeply shaped by this matrix, a vibrant world where statesmen, orators, poets, and thinkers mingled, competed, and sought the roots of justice and truth. Situated within this bustling cradle of civilization, Plato encountered Socrates, whose relentless questioning and methodical pursuit of wisdom left an indelible impression on the young philosopher. Plato's legacy is manifold. At its core lies the audacious theory of forms, which posits a realm of transcendent ideas that underpin and give meaning to the fleeting particulars of the material world. In the Republic, Plato constructs both a vision of political order and a treatise on human nature, where the philosopher-king emerges as the ideal sovereign. Yet, Plato's contributions extend far beyond abstract speculation. He was an architect of education, founding the academy, an enduring institution that nurtured generations of thinkers, including Aristotle. Central to Plato's philosophy are enduring ethical inquiries. What is the good? What constitutes a virtuous life? In his exploration of virtue, reason, and the nature of knowledge, Plato established the bedrock upon which ethical thought and epistemology rest. His dialectical method, grounded in rigorous dialogue and rational deliberation, remains a gold standard in philosophical investigation. This book, Plato, The Mind That Built Philosophy, endeavors to chart the terrain of Plato's life, his epoch, and his legacy. Through a systematic exploration of key themes, his historical context, pivotal relationships, seminal doctrines, political philosophies, educational projects, moral philosophy, epistemology, and enduring influence, this volume offers readers not only a portrait of Plato, but also an analytical compass for navigating the perennial questions that continue to animate philosophical debate today. Through such inquiry, Plato's mind continues to build, inspire, and challenge the philosophical imagination. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an audiobook that could change your life. Now, let's begin. Enjoy. Chapter 1. The Athenian World, Plato's Historical Context. To comprehend Plato's philosophical contributions, it is imperative to situate his thought within the context of the Athenian world during his lifetime. Plato was born in 427 BCE and lived through a period marked by significant socio-political change, which in turn shaped his perspectives and intellectual pursuits. Athens, during the late 5th and early 4th centuries BCE, was the preeminent center of Greek culture, democracy, and intellectual activity. The city had established itself as a power after the Persian Wars, cultivating a unique model of direct democracy, which allowed a large proportion of its citizens to participate in governance. However, this period of prosperity was shadowed by the protracted and devastating Peloponnesian War against Sparta, which plunged Athens into political turmoil, economic hardship, and eventually, Plato's family was aristocratic, with roots in both politics and religion. Many of his relatives held prominent positions in the Athenian government. Most notably, his uncle Charmides and his cousin Critias were associated with the 30 Tyrants, the brief but brutal oligarchic regime that ruled Athens after its defeat by Sparta in 404 BCE. Plato's proximity to such power circles exposed him to both the allure and the corrosive effects of political ambition and injustice. The democratic experiment in Athens was distinctive for its inclusion, yet it was also capable of dramatic swings and populist excesses. The very system that enabled broad civic participation was, in Plato's eyes, susceptible to demagoguery and mob rule. The execution of Socrates, Plato's mentor, in 399 BCE following charges of impiety and corrupting the youth, occurred within this volatile democratic climate. The incident would leave an enduring scar on Plato's view of democracy and justice, profoundly influencing his subsequent philosophical pursuits. Intellectually, Athens was a crucible of inquiry and debate. The city hosted a diversity of thinkers, poets, sophists, rhetoricians, mathematicians, and philosophers whose ideas often clashed as much as they converged. The sophists, itinerant teachers who promised wisdom and success in public life, represented a pragmatic, relativistic approach to truth. Their skepticism and rhetorical flair stood in stark contrast to the methodical dialectical approach espoused by Socrates and, later, Plato. Art, drama, architecture, and public life in Athens reached profound levels of sophistication. The works of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides were performed before thousands in the theatre of Dionysus. The Parthenon stood as a symbol of Athenian achievement, and public forums agoras buzzed with debate and commerce. This vibrant urban culture deeply informed Plato's sensibilities and provided the backdrop against which his philosophical drama unfolded. In summary, Plato's Athens was a world both regal and restless, a city that moved briskly between greatness and chaos. Political instability, intellectual rivalry, and ethical uncertainty marked his formative years. It was these realities witnessed at close quarters that catalyzed Plato's quest for deeper truths about virtue, justice, knowledge, and the ideal ordering of human affairs. It is thus impossible to fully apprehend Plato's philosophy without first understanding the historical and cultural crucible in which it was forged. Chapter 2. From Student to Teacher, Plato and Socrates. Plato's philosophical journey was indelibly shaped by his relationship with Socrates, the enigmatic figure whose method and martyrdom left an everlasting imprint on Western thought. The bond between student and teacher, their exchange of ideas, and Socrates' ultimate trial and death are not merely biographical footnotes. They constitute the very genesis of Plato's broader intellectual pursuits. Socrates, who lived from 469 to 399 BCE, was a fixture in Athenian public life. Unlike other philosophers of his time, he wrote nothing. His wisdom, methods, and legendary persona survive almost exclusively through the accounts of his students, with Plato being the preeminent chronicler. Socrates' approach, marked by relentless questioning, moral seriousness, and an insistence on intellectual humility, radically reoriented the focus of philosophy from cosmological speculation to ethical inquiry. As a young man of aristocratic standing, Plato could have easily pursued a traditional path in politics or public service. However, the specter of Athenian political unpredictability, coupled with the example of Socrates, directed Plato towards philosophy as a vocation. It is said that Socrates' execution was especially traumatic for Plato, who witnessed the dangers inherent in public life and the inadequacies of Athenian justice. The trauma galvanized Plato's view that only fundamental philosophical reform could rectify the corruption and misjudgment rampant in political life. The Socratic method, otherwise known as elenchus, relied on dialectical interrogation. Socrates would engage interlocutors in conversations aimed at exposing inconsistencies and stimulating the pursuit of true wisdom. Plato, in his early dialogues, often features himself as a participant or observer of these conversations, preserving the drama and rigor of Socratic questioning. The dialogues not only honor his teacher's legacy, but serve as Plato's primary literary mode for exploring philosophical issues. Plato's main philosophical divergence from Socrates was the former's interest in metaphysics and ontology, where Socrates was mainly concerned with practical ethics and the virtues necessary for a good life. Plato expanded the discourse by postulating the existence of perfect forms abstract, eternal realities transcending the particulars of sensory experience. Nevertheless, the guiding spirit of Socratic inquiry, its humility, dialogism, and ethical seriousness, remained at the core of Plato's thought. Another crucial aspect of their relationship was Plato's response to the charge that philosophy was irrelevant or even dangerous. If Socrates was killed for questioning the established norms, Plato's lifelong project became the vindication and institutionalization of philosophical inquiry. Plato's Academy, founded around 387 BCE, was the first institution of higher learning in the Western world and was dedicated to preserving and extending Socratic methods. Ultimately, the interaction between Plato and Socrates is foundational not only for Plato's philosophical evolution, but also for the self-understanding of philosophy itself. It is a lineage marked by reverence for truth over convention, dialogue over dogma, and ethical clarity over expediency. In every major treatise, and especially in his dialogues, Plato remains a student of Socrates, even as he emerges as a teacher for generations to come. Chapter 3. Form and Reality. Plato's Theory of Forms. One of Plato's most significant philosophical innovations is his theory of forms, a doctrine that addresses the relationship between the intelligible world of abstract realities and the perceptible world of concrete particulars. The theory of forms represents the epistemological and metaphysical heart of Plato's thought, offering a solution to perennial philosophical problems involving change, knowledge, and universals. At its core, the theory of forms posits that beyond the shifting world of sensory experience lies a higher, immutable reality, the forms or ideas. Aid in Greek, each form is a pure, perfect exemplar of its kind. There is, for instance, a form of beauty, a form of justice, a form of the good. These forms exist in their own right, independently of the fluctuating particulars we encounter through our senses. According to Plato, the material world is a world of becoming. It is fleeting, changing, and imperfect. The many beautiful things we observe, a flower, a sculpture, a sunset, are beautiful only to the extent that they participate in or imitate the form of beauty. The objects themselves are transient, but beauty itself, as a form, is eternal, unchanging, and intelligible only to the mind, not the senses. The famous allegory of the cave, presented in the Republic, illustrates this ontological scheme. Plato describes prisoners chained inside a cave, able to see only the shadows of objects passing in front of a fire behind them. These shadows represent the sensory particulars, while the journey outside the cave and the apprehension of true objects in the sunlight symbolize the philosopher's ascent to knowledge of the forms. The sun, in this analogy, represents the form of the good, the ultimate principle that illuminates and gives being to all other forms. Critically, the theory of forms addresses the issue of knowledge. For Plato, genuine knowledge, episteme, cannot be about the mutable world, since what changes is not fully knowable. Only the unchanging forms can be the object of true knowledge. everything else is mere opinion. Doxa, for this reason, philosophy's task is not merely to catalogue experience, but to reason upward through dialectic toward the apprehension of fundamental realities. The implications of the theory of forms are profound. In ethics, it provides an objective ground for virtues and moral values. Justice is not a matter of convention, but participation in the form of justice. In epistemology, it distinguishes between opinion and knowledge. In politics, it justifies the philosopher's rule: only those who apprehend the forms, and especially the form of the good, are fit to govern. Plato's theory has not been without its critics, both in antiquity and in modern times. Aristotle, Plato's student, questioned the independent existence of forms and proposed that universals exist within things themselves. Nevertheless, Plato's theory of forms remains a pivotal achievement in the history of philosophy, an attempt to reconcile the flux of experience with the permanence of truth, and to demonstrate that reality is ultimately ordered by rational, intelligible principles. Chapter 4: The Philosopher King, Politics and the Republic. Plato's political philosophy finds its fullest expression in the Republic, a dialogue that remains one of the most influential texts in Western political thought. In it, Plato unveils a vision of the ideal state, a structured society governed by philosopher kings, wherein justice is realized not through mere legal codes, but by the harmonious arrangement of classes and souls. The starting point of Plato's political inquiry is a question: what is justice, both in the individual and in the state? Plato's answer, methodically built through dialectical discussion, begins with an analogy between the structure of the city, polis, and that of the soul. Just as the individual is composed of parts, the rationale, the spirited, and the appetitive, so society divides into three classes: rulers, philosophers, auxiliaries, warriors, and producers, farmers, artisans. Justice, for Plato, arises when each part or class performs its natural function without encroaching on the roles of others. The rational element, both in the soul and the city, must govern. The spirited must support courageously. The appetitive must follow with discipline. Social justice and personal virtue thus mirror one another. Why should philosophers rule? Plato argues that only those who have ascended to knowledge of the forms, especially the form of the good, possess the wisdom, self-control, and vision required for genuine leadership. The philosopher king, trained in dialectic and educated in truth, is uniquely fit to discern the interests of the whole community. This is a radical inversion of the political order in Athens, where politics was often the realm of the ambitious and the eloquent, not necessarily the wise. The education of the guardian class is central to Plato's political vision. Through extensive training in mathematics, dialectic, and physical discipline, the guardians are prepared to transcend personal interests and govern justly. Their lifestyle is to be austere, communal, and free from private property or familial ties, ensuring their loyalty to the public good. Plato's Republic is also marked by its critique of democracy. Having witnessed Athens' descent into populism and the tragic execution of Socrates, Plato distrusted government by the untrained masses. He viewed democracy as a system prone to demagoguery, instability, and the erosion of virtue. Oligarchy, tyranny, and democracy are critiqued as flawed regimes, all symptomatic of society's failure to align with philosophical principles. Although the Republic sketches a utopian vision, many of its elements meritocratic education, the search for just governance, the integration of ethics and politics continue to influence debates on ideal institutions. Critics have noted potential dangers in Plato's vision, such as its perceived authoritarianism, censorship, and the subordination of individual freedoms. Yet the core insight remains: political life can only be truly just when grounded in the wisdom that philosophy uniquely provides. In sum, Plato's Republic offers a profound interrogation of justice, power, and the possibility of a good society. Its legacy is evident in later philosophical traditions and continues to serve as a touchstone for contemporary debates on the role of intellect, virtue, and governance. Chapter 5. Academy and Legacy. Plato as Educator. While Plato is primarily celebrated for his philosophical writings, his enduring influence is inseparable from his role as an educator. The establishment of the Academy, around 387 BC, widely regarded as the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, marks a pivotal moment in the history of education and intellectual culture. In this chapter, we examine the foundational ideas underpinning Plato's educational philosophy, the structure and activities of the Academy, and its far-reaching legacy. The founding of the Academy was, for Plato, both a practical and a philosophical response to the challenges of his era. After the execution of Socrates, Plato became convinced that the survival and flourishing of philosophy depended on the creation of a stable institutional environment where inquiry could proceed free from political interference and sophistic manipulation. The Academy, situated just outside the walls of Athens in a sacred grove, provided such a setting, one in which rigorous debate, mutual challenge, and lifelong learning could thrive. Plato's vision of education was deeply integrative, aiming not just at the acquisition of knowledge, but at the cultivation of virtue and wisdom. For him, education was not merely a means to professional or civic advancement. It was an ascent of the soul, a transformative journey towards the apprehension of truth. In his model curriculum, as outlined in the Republic and reflected in the practices of the Academy, subjects ranged from mathematics, astronomy, and music to dialectic and philosophical debate. Dialectic, the art of structured conversation and rational inquiry, was the soul of Platonic education. Students at the Academy engaged in critical discussions, analysis of doctrines, and the application of reason to moral, metaphysical, and political questions. In doing so, they internalized not only the content of particular disciplines, but the habits of intellectual humility and analytical precision. The Academy was distinct from later universities in several respects. Admission was open and informal. Individuals with a genuine interest in philosophy were welcome. The curriculum was flexible, adapted to the abilities and progress of students, rather than fixed by rigid standards. The atmosphere was communal and collegial, fostering the exchange of ideas across generational and disciplinary lines. Perhaps the most illustrious product of the Academy was Aristotle, whose philosophical outlook would deeply shape the course of Western thought. Other notable students and successors, the so-called Old Academy, carried forward Plato's teachings, often adapting them to new intellectual and political circumstances. The closure of the Academy by Emperor Justinian in 529 CE marked the end of an era, but by then, the Platonic tradition had already permeated the vitals of Western education. The idea that philosophy and education are inseparable, that learning is ultimately a moral and intellectual quest, remains one of Plato's most enduring legacies. In modern times, institutions, curricula, and even the very concept of the university bear the stamp of Platonic ideals. Through the Academy, Plato not only educated generations of students, but established a model for critical inquiry, rational debate, and ethical development. In fostering a community where truth could be sought for its own sake, Plato built an institution both literal and metaphorical upon which the edifice of Western philosophy and education would stand. Chapter 6. Ethics and Virtue. The moral foundations of Plato's thought. The ethical philosophy of Plato is distinguished by its ambition, rigor, and centrality within his larger system of thought. Far from being merely theoretical, Plato's inquiries into ethics were motivated by the acute social and political chaos of his day, a need to discover the principles that might ensure both individual happiness and communal harmony. A key concept in Platonic ethics is virtue, aret, which for Plato is not a mere habit or social convention, but an objective excellence intrinsic to the soul's proper functioning. Plato identifies four cardinal virtues: wisdom, Sophia, courage, Andrea, temperance, Sophrosyne, and justice. Dikaiosyn. Each virtue corresponds to a part of the soul, and analogously, to a class within the ideal political community. Wisdom is the virtue of the rational part of the soul and is necessary for governing oneself and others. Courage, associated with the spirited part, equips individuals to defend the good against internal and external threats. Temperance is the harmony that arises when the unruly appetites are subordinate to reason. Justice, the foundation of all other virtues, is the condition in which each part of the soul performs its proper role in coordination with the whole. Plato's ethical theory is teleological. Human beings possess a specific nature, and living well is a matter of realizing that nature to the fullest. Since the soul is essentially rational, the good life is the life of reason, the contemplation and practice of what is true and good. Happiness, eudaimonia, the ultimate aim of human existence, is thus achieved not by pursuing external goods, but through self-mastery and philosophical understanding. In the dialogues, Plato explores the nature of virtue through dialectic. Socrates, often Plato's mouthpiece in early works, relentlessly questions interlocutors about the meaning of justice, courage, and piety. The quest frequently ends in aporia, puzzlement, but the process itself is instructive, teaching the limits of mere opinion and the necessity for philosophical rigor. Plato's moral philosophy places great emphasis on the power of reason to govern desire. The healthy soul is described in the Republic as a well-ordered city where reason rules, the spirited part supports, and desires are disciplined. This inner harmony allows for the triumph of principle over impulse and aligns the individual with the cosmic order. Nevertheless, Plato's ethics are not isolated from his metaphysics. The objectivity of moral values is anchored in the forms. Virtues such as justice and goodness are not subjective constructs, but objective realities, eternally the same. This doctrine provides a robust challenge to relativism and sophistic skepticism, asserting that moral truths can be known by the mind. In addressing ethical dilemmas, Plato recognizes the difficulty of living a just life in a corrupt world. His accounts of the philosopher's alienation and the noble lie reflect the tensions between moral ideals and political realities. Yet, the overarching aim remains to form character capable of transcending circumstance, to show that the examined life, as Socrates claimed, is indeed worth living. Chapter 7. Reason and Knowledge, the Epistemology of Plato. Plato's contributions to epistemology, the theory of knowledge, are as foundational as his work in ethics and politics. Central to his philosophy is the distinction between opinion, doxa, and knowledge, episteme, and the assertion that genuine knowledge is certain, universal, and grounded in the unchanging world of forms. Plato's skepticism towards sensory perception as a source of knowledge is evident throughout his dialogues. In texts such as Theaetetus and Phaedo, he argues that the senses provide only shifting impressions of the material world, which is itself transient and contingent. What we perceive beautiful objects, just actions, particular triangles, is always subject to variation, decay, and imperfection. As a result, reliance on the senses can yield only opinion, not knowledge. In contrast, Plato posits the existence of the forms, eternal, immaterial, and perfect exemplars of all things that exist. To have knowledge is to apprehend these forms. The form of beauty, for example, is not any single beautiful thing, but the very principle of beauty itself. Similarly, the form of justice transcends just acts, encapsulating justice in its purest sense. Knowledge arises when the soul, unclouded by the distractions of the body and senses, contemplates these forms intellectually. The process of attaining this knowledge is depicted in several allegories and metaphors. In the famous allegory of the cave, The Republic, Plato describes prisoners chained in darkness, mistaking shadows cast on a wall for reality. Liberation from the cave represents the ascent from the world of appearances to the world of reality, the forms culminating in the direct vision of the good. The divided line metaphor further distinguishes between the lower realm of belief and imagination and the higher realm of mathematical reasoning and pure intellectual apprehension. For Plato, learning is not simply the acquisition of new information, but the recollection, anamnesis, of knowledge the soul possessed prior to its embodiment. This doctrine, presented most fully in Meno and Phaedo, suggests that all learning is ultimately remembering truths witnessed in a pre-existent state. Thus, genuine education is a process of awakening latent knowledge, guided by philosophical inquiry. Plato's Epistemology is inseparable from his method of dialectic, the practice of critical questioning and refutation, exemplified by Socrates. Through dialectic, the philosopher breaks down false beliefs and moves closer to genuine understanding. This disciplined questioning not only clarifies concepts, but also trains the mind to ascend, step by step, towards the contemplation of the forms. A crucial aspect of Plato's theory of knowledge is the role of the philosopher. Distinct from sophists or rhetoricians concerned with persuasion, the philosopher seeks truth as an end in itself. The path to knowledge is arduous, marked by doubt, self-examination, and sometimes radical intellectual revision. Yet for Plato, only those who undertake this journey are fit to lead and educate others, hence his advocacy for philosopher kings. Plato's epistemological contributions have proven both influential and contentious. While subsequent philosophers such as Aristotle critiqued the separation of forms from sensible things, Plato's insistence on the importance of universals, forms of reasoning, and rational inquiry underpin later developments in logic, science, and mathematics. In conclusion, Plato's quest for certainty, his mistrust of opinion and the senses, and his elevation of abstract universal truth constitute enduring pillars of epistemology. For centuries, philosophers have grappled with his questions and arguments, refining, challenging, and expanding them in pursuit of a definitive answer to the timeless question, what can we know and how? Chapter 8. Beyond Plato, His Influence and Relevance Today. The enduring relevance of Plato's philosophy is a testament to the depth and breadth of his thought. More than 2 millennia after his death, Plato remains a central figure in discussions spanning metaphysics, ethics, politics, art, education, and science. His influence permeates the very foundations of Western intellectual and cultural traditions. In the history of philosophy, Plato's impact is immense. The Academy's tradition of dialectical inquiry established rigorous standards for philosophical debate and education, setting the tone for subsequent schools Aristotelian, Stoic, Epicurean, Neoplatonic, and more. Notably, Neoplatonism, spearheaded by figures like Plotinus, revived and reinterpreted Plato's teachings, shaping early Christian theology and medieval scholasticism. Augustine of Hippo, one of the most influential Christian thinkers, directly acknowledged Plato's writings as essential to his own formation. In science and mathematics, Plato's insistence on the priority of abstract, immutable entities laid the intellectual groundwork for subsequent developments in logic, geometry, and theoretical science. The phrase inscribed at the entrance to the academy, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here," testifies to Plato's conviction that mathematical reasoning was key to unlocking the mysteries of reality. Modern mathematicians and physicists continue to draw inspiration from his belief in the underlying order and intelligibility of the cosmos. In political thought, Plato's notion of the philosopher king and his analysis of just government continue to provide a reference point in debates about leadership, authority, and the relationship between knowledge and power. While few accept his model in its entirety, elements of Platonic justice and the importance of education for rulers appear in both utopian and pragmatic political theories. Plato's legacy also resonates in the arts and literature. His skepticism toward art, articulated in his critique of mimesis in the Republic, challenged artists to reconsider representation, reality, and the value of creation. Writers, dramatists, and painters throughout history have engaged with Platonic dialogues, borrowing his frameworks or reacting against his positions. Perhaps most significantly, Plato's method and spirit remain a living resource. The Socratic tradition of inquiry, posing questions, testing assumptions, and reasoning toward clearer understanding, constitutes a universal toolkit for intellectual and ethical life. In an era marked by unprecedented access to information and profound social and technological change, the need for critical reasoning, the search for objective truth, and the aspiration toward lived wisdom are more vital than ever. Plato's influence is also evident outside academic philosophy. In therapy, education, and public discourse, his emphasis on dialogue, self-examination, and pursuit of the good continue to inspire. Movements for educational reform, models of liberal education, and programs aimed at cultivating moral character all reflect Platonic ideals. Debate persists about the applicability of Plato's ideas to contemporary challenges. His metaphysics, for example, is at odds with many modern scientific paradigms. His views on political hierarchy and censorship are often criticized as authoritarian. Yet, even his critics find in Plato a worthy interlocutor who compels rigorous argument and self-reflection. In conclusion, Plato's thought endures because it addresses perennial questions about reality, knowledge, justice, and the good life. His commitment to dialogue, critical inquiry, and the transformative power of reason provides a timeless framework for confronting the challenges and uncertainties of every age. Plato is not merely one who shaped philosophy. He set its enduring agenda, a testament to the capacity of a single mind to illuminate the path of human wisdom across the centuries. If you found this video helpful, inspiring, or entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Your support means the world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.